Hello, my name is Chris Wang. I want to talk to you today about using and tailoring your sales messaging to maximize success in the sales development role. So that's the explicit goal of this session. How we're going to do this is we need to talk about the different types of people that we'll be speaking with. We'll explore what they care about, what their desires are, and we'll figure out how we can tailor our approach to maximize success with each type of audience. And so for those of y'all that aren't as familiar with, they call this entire thing persona-based messaging, right? The basic idea is that we have to go tailor our approach and our messaging depending on who we're talking to. And as a great example of that on a basic level, if I'm working with children, like in a volunteer capacity, which I do, then I'm going to treat that individual very differently than if I'm talking to an adult, right? So my body language will be different. My language itself will be different. The things that I say will be different, and so on and so forth. And this is the exact same thing with sales. So this is also compounded by the fact that GitLab is extremely broad. And what I mean by that is we actually have different use cases that are important for different types of people and different roles. So what I mean by that is if you're speaking to a director who's in charge of development, the pieces and functionality of our product that would resonate with this person would be different than if you're talking to a director of security. And so because GitLab does so many different things, it's really important to understand the intersection of what that role is and how to tailor our approach from a features and functionality perspective. So some of the people that we're going to be speaking about today, we'll be talking about the technical individual contributors, and we're also going to be talking about business leadership. And these are the two main groups of people that we're going to explore today. So the first type of person that we want to explore are the technical individual contributors. And one of the things that I want to say is that many of your conversations will be technical individual contributors. I'll explore a little bit about my background. I was a technical individual contributor for about half a decade when I worked for Red Hat. And so I'll tell you some stories about my own personal life. But the main thing to sort of understand about these technical individual contributors is that in general, these people aren't the ultimate decision maker, but they may be leveraged as an influencer to that eventual technical decision maker. And so how I've seen this generally work out is that there's some director, he's responsible for picking out some new tools for some big business initiative. And this director is basically going to delegate down some of these tasks to number one, number two different senior engineers, right? And so these senior engineers have been now delegated the task of figuring out some of the tooling choices. So they're not responsible for the ultimate decision making, but they're responsible for coming up with a list of options that they really like. So one thing that I want to say is they're more influential with title. You're not going to get one of these like tool selection projects unless you're senior or principal level or a team lead. And the other thing is that as organizations expand out, these people generally have less influence. And so if you're prospecting into a large enterprise organization or public sector, then you're going to have less luck targeting a lot of these technical individual contributors. What they do on a day-to-day basis, they're responsible for technical implementation of projects. So developing a new website, making it faster, making it more secure. And the last thing I want to talk about is that there's many different types. So some titles that you may see are software engineers, developers, SREs, DevOps, so on and so forth. And so one of the things that's really important to understand when engaging with these technical individual contributors is that it's very, very, very important to keep a couple of things in mind. And the reason why is because they're often highly skeptical of sales and marketing, especially our assets and our language. So I'm going to give you an example of this. If you ever want to know what engineers think about some sort of technology or tool, you can just check out what they're saying on Reddit, because this is one of the places in which technical individual contributors, they just discuss technology. And so over here, there's an actual article. Someone's asking a question about this thing called DevSecOps, and the engineers are actually making fun of the marketing language that people are using, right? So basically what they're saying is that this stuff is nonsense. Like, I hate this language. This is ridiculous that people are saying this in the first place. So that's why it's really, really, really important to be aware of the language that we're using. I completely use a different set of language if I'm talking to a technical individual contributor versus someone who's in business leadership. So that being said, one of the great things that we can do to take advantage and engage them more is the fact that because these people are responsible for technical implementation, they're generally really into learning, right? They love learning about the newest thing in technology. A lot of times people in these technical individual contributor roles, they're very excited about technology. They love learning new things. And so if we take a more of a consultative approach where we're teaching them about new trends and new capabilities and new features, and that's a really great way in which we can engage them. The last tip that I have is try to talk to them using their own language. So we're not pretending to be engineers here, but what I mean by this is that I'm not going to use business talk like return on investment, our time to value, our things like that with a technical individual contributor. Instead, I'm going to talk about features and capabilities and speed and efficiency because that's what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So this is a chart that I really want you to internalize, and it has to do with how I tailor my language and the assets that I give out depending on whom I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a technical individual contributor, I really want to paint in their mind that there's exciting new ways that you can do things that's going to improve your life, and that GitLab has many of these features built in. So what we're really talking about is the awesome things that we do from a capabilities perspective. So features, what sort of things does GitLab actually do? And then numbers and things that like basically make their lives easier, right? So 300 times faster, 20% more efficient. If I ever send out a case study, then it's going to be around things like speed and efficiency. But what I'm not going to talk about is I'm not going to talk about some of these things that you'd hear in a business class. So like return on investment, time to value, culture, stuff like that. In terms of the assets, I really want them to understand and see our product in action and how it can basically make their lives easier. So I'm going to show them product demos, things like product documentation. Product documentation is really great at illustrating how you can actually do things with their product. And what I'm not going to send is things like customer references, analyst reports by Gartner and Forrester. And the reason why is because these people are in charge of technical implementation. They're not as focused on the business as a whole. One thing that I want to talk about is this is a really great sales book if you haven't read it in the past. But one of the things about many technical individual contributors is that a lot of times they have, they're really excited about learning new technology. And if we can teach them something new, and then they're going to be really likely to engage with us. And so talking about new exciting ways of doing something, new exciting practices, this is a great way to get engagement with technical individual contributors. So I alluded to this earlier, because our product is so deep, it's really important to talk about features and capabilities that match the audience that you're speaking with. And in general, what I want to talk about over here in this chart is the fact that there's different types of engineers and they care about different parts of our product. So I'm not going to go over this slide from different types of engineers and what falls under their responsibilities. But what I will say is that just keep in mind, people have different parts of the product that's going to resonate with them. And you can reference this slide later. So now that we've talked about technical individual contributors, I want to start and move to how to engage leadership. And so this is where we're going to have a lot more success in terms of getting those sales accepted opportunities, because these are the people who are the ultimate decision makers. And so one of the things that we need to start out with is agreeing on definitions, right? And so someone with the title of director is going to be very different in a large enterprise company versus a company that's just starting out and maybe have 10 employees. And so that's why I have this picture of a cake here. As the organization gets bigger, then there's more and more and more levels. So what I mean by that is C-level, then senior vice president, and then regular vice president, and then senior director, regular director, assistant director, so on and so forth. And there's going to be basically more layers to the cake. For a smaller company like small medium business, when I worked for a tech startup, about 40% of all of the employees had a director level or higher. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But in these next couple of slides, really what I'm talking about is this set of definitions for titles. So this is really a set of definitions that comes from primarily the enterprise and public sector. What I mean by this is that someone with the title manager, these are the people responsible for managing a team of technical individual contributors. A director is someone who's going to be managing maybe 5 to 6 managers. A VP typically manages maybe 4 or 5 different directors, and then C-level is going to manage an entire business unit. So chief marketing officer, chief like engineering officer, or chief technology officer. Yeah, so there's not typically a chief engineering officer, more CTO, so on and so forth. But that being said, these roles, they vary. And then so sometimes businesses do them differently. And the other takeaway point is that as your company gets smaller, then your director really could not have any direct reports, right? It could just be a director who is really an individual contributor. All right, so just talking about some of these general principles. First general principle I want to illustrate is the fact that you're going to get delegated to the level that you speak to. So what I mean by that is if I come into a meeting with a VP level and I start talking about all these really granular and specific technical things, because this VP doesn't work with a lot of these things on a day-to-day basis, then that language isn't going to resonate with the VP. What's going to happen a lot of the time is the VP is going to think, all right, this person may actually have some valuable information, but this isn't my wheelhouse. So I'm going to go set this person up to meet with my principal engineer who's in charge of this specific thing. So that's why it's really important to speak to the appropriate level. If I'm talking to C-level or VP, I'm talking about business level goals, initiatives. I'm talking about where they see their organization going in the next 2 to 3 years, some of the challenges that they have with their competitors and what I'm seeing in their industry. And then as I go down more to the execution level, so a level 1 manager, level 2 manager, these are the people that are responsible for implementing the work. And so at that level, I'm going to talk more about GitLab and their responsibilities and what they do on a day-to-day basis, how our product helps to expedite their job and to help them to achieve their goals. So principle number 1, you get delegated to the level that you speak to. The other thing that I want to talk about is sometimes getting delegated down is okay. And the reason why is because we actually have a lot of success when we get delegated down. And just imagine it from the business perspective, right? So you come in, you get a meeting with a VP. The VP basically says, hey, I'm going to set you up with this meeting with my senior manager in charge of DevOps. And now that senior manager is going to be really, because it's a project, an assignment given from the VP, the senior manager is going to accept your meeting. And he or she is going to be interested in hearing what you have to say. And so we've actually had good success after we get delegated down to different, delegated down. So that being said, it's not ideal, but if you do get delegated down, there are also worse things that can happen. We talked about tailoring your approach. And so just to re-summarize what I mean by this, if I'm talking to someone on the executive level, I'm going to be focused on the business. If I'm talking to someone who's on the implementation level, so a manager, level 2 manager, even a director, then I'm going to talk about GitLab, what they're trying to do, and how we can enhance whatever they're trying to do. Once I get to senior director level, then it's going to be more of a mix, right? So it's going to be a good amount of the business level objectives, but also about some of the implementation and some of the features and functionality. And so ultimately, my language and my assets, they're shifting as I go up and down this leadership organizational structure. And so to sort of summarize, now on the leadership side, things that I'm talking about return on investment, time to value, best practices, things like culture. From an assets perspective, a lot of these high-level leaders, they're really interested in what their competitors are doing. So case studies and customer references are really important. Analyst reports like Gartner and Forrester, they matter if it's related to what they're trying to do. So if you hear a customer trying to implement something like microservices and add into their organization, then if we have a great analyst report about GitLab enhancing microservices, then that's definitely going to resonate with them. And once again, this language is primarily for more the executive level. And as you go basically to those tier 1 and tier 2 managers, it's more going to be about some of these technical implementation things with a little bit of business sprinkled in. So talking a little bit about the different types of leaders that you're going to be interfacing with. The first thing that I want to talk about is the level 1 managers. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that these people, a lot of times they're under a lot of pressure. And so I'm just going to talk about this one report. So there's an organization called the Project Management Institute. It found out that 14% of IT projects fail across industry. But that being said, out of those that didn't fail, 31% didn't meet their goals, 43% exceeded budget, and 49% were late. And so it's really important to understand that when we're prospecting out into some of these leaders that are responsible for technical implementation, then one of the biggest fears that they have is being late with their projects. It's a stressful situation for everyone, and it basically makes you look bad. So one of the things that is really important to emphasize is how does GitLab help these people, whatever they're trying to do? So manager in charge of development, how do we help out development? Manager in charge of DevOps, how do we help out DevOps? How does GitLab help these managers to achieve their goals in a more efficient manner that's going to help them to achieve deadline? So that's one of the things that I try to emphasize and really hammer home when I'm talking to some of these leaders that still deal with technical implementation. When we're starting to talk with the director level, these people are often decision makers at this point. So they're in charge of a good amount of budget. So landing at the director level is where we see a lot of success. In the enterprise, in the United States and in Europe, a lot of times we get our meetings through directors, and this is where we ultimately get credit for sales accepted opportunities. So my trick for dealing with directors is it's now a mix of technical implementation and business talk. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to basically ask them, what are the things that you're trying to do in your organization from a technical level? What are some of the things that are required for you to implement these business processes? And then now let me help to explain how GitLab can help for you to achieve some of these things. At this point in time, you often still have like a director of engineering, director of security, director of DevOps. And so it's so like, once again, tailoring our approach for what they're responsible for. And sometimes there may not be a director of DevOps as well, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Finally, about senior leadership. So VP level, C level, and really what these people are in charge of is making sure that their business unit is competitive and ultimately driving business value for their internal stakeholders as well as their external stakeholders. And so they want to be seen as a value driver for whatever organization they're part of. They want to be able to point to these awesome things that they're doing to drive success for their business. They also really want to make sure that they're competitive across industry. So how do they rank up with their peer institutions? And so that's why assets like case studies and customer references are really important. Other things is that they're definitely the budget controllers and the decision makers. And then so my approach for these folk is, how can GitLab help you to transform your business? What are the things that you're trying to do? What are some of the bottlenecks in your organization today? How can we help for you to have a competitive and efficient organization so that you are ultimately driving value to your stakeholders, right? And so some of the things that I will mention over here are things like best practices. How does GitLab help you to implement best practices in your organization? Also things like cultural changes. So a lot of times you may hear, we're a very siloed organization. We have too many silos in engineering. And what that really means is that we have lots and lots of teams and they're not communicating with each other. Because they're not communicating with each other, people are reproducing work, they're missing deadlines, so on and so forth. So how do we help with collaboration? Another thing is, how do we have more transparency in our business unit? One of the features that really helps out some of these business leaders is something called value stream analytics. And so I'm going to share a little bit about that. So let me jump in and talk about some of these things for our product. And I really want to just take a couple of minutes to illustrate how GitLab can transform a business. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about is Agile and automation. Agile is a best practice for businesses around the world. And so really what that is how do you have good flows for work in your organization? So over here is an example of one of the issue boards that we offer for our product. And so over here, you can think about this as a great way of grouping and organizing all of the work in your business. So every single thing that your organization's working on, it's one of these tickets or issues in GitLab. And as people start working on it, then you can see that their little icon appears on it. So this person's now been assigned. A leader can now go and see what everyone's working on at any given point in time and who is responsible for implementing each of these things. As these issues get done, then what ends up happening is that they end up in the closed column. And so all of this work is flowing. These issues start out in the open column, and then they move to the right into the closed column. And then so now, if you're a business leader, you have a visual for figuring out what's happening in the flow of work in your organization. So this is an example of how GitLab can enable the best practice of agile transformation for a business unit. Another thing that I want to talk about is automation. So let me pull up an example of automation real quick. One of the things to really know about for GitLab is that when you're in software development, then there's all sorts of little small things that you have to do that are oftentimes manual. And so all of this stuff is slowing you down. A lot of times it's boring. And so GitLab allows these engineering groups to automate a lot of these tasks out to save you time and ultimately to allow you to become more efficient. So as an example, here is an example of our automation. Every time, so let me actually start out from here. So over here, one of our developers is trying to implement a change, they're adding in all of this green text, they're removing this red text. And then so this is basically the process of software development. They're editing these code files. Because this developer is trying to hand in new work, all of this stuff has now happened in an automated fashion. So some of the things that are involved in this is making sure that the code works. We're testing it. There's over 100,000 tests that were run as part of this code submission. And then other things that we do is we make sure that this code is secure. So we're going to scan it for security vulnerabilities, as you can see here. And let's now take a look at some of the things that are being done in our automation. So we're preparing an environment, setting things up, other things as software build. That's something that's often manual and time intensive. The test section is where a lot of the value of our automation comes in. As you can see, there's around maybe 30 different individual jobs that are here that we're testing for specific things. And all of this is ensuring that our customers are operating efficiently and that we're saving them time. So all in all, we've probably automated around 50 to 60 different things as part of this GitLab automation. And once again, this is another best practice of having automation in your organization, which is allow you to become more efficient. The next thing that I want to talk about is how we can change an organization's culture. And this is something that is really important for executive leaders to understand. And all of this stuff really stems from the fact that we're one shared platform for everyone. So in many organizations, your developers will be developing on one platform, your DevOps people are going to be operating out of another platform, your security people may be operating out of 15 different platforms. And because of that, it's really hard for you to know what other groups are doing. And so when everyone operates out of one shared platform, you get things like better collaboration and transparency. Let me give you an example of that. So over here in these issues that we took a look at, one of the great things that all of your different team members are on the same platform is the fact that you can have better cross-functional collaboration. Someone from development may be asking a question, someone may have insight from your test team. Then you might have feedback from your security and your operations teams. So in other words, because we are one shared platform for everyone, we allow for better cross-functional collaboration. This allows you to break down some of the silos in your organization and allows you to basically, there's a lot of business benefits, but long story in short, people communicate better with each other, and then ultimately, people may have insights that help out other people that they weren't aware of because we have this better cross-functional collaboration. So this is a collaboration in the issue level. When people are handing in code, a similar thing can happen. So here's a code submission. This engineer, Andrew, trying to add in these green lines of text, take out these red lines of text. And one of the things that they're really doing over here is we could have better cross-functional collaboration over here. We could have developers from other groups, security people, test people, all chiming in. And ultimately, this is going to allow people to create a better code submission. So that's collaboration. Transparency. One of the things that I want to mention is it's often not necessary because GitLab is one shared work platform, then it's very easy for me to see what each business unit is doing in our organization. And so over here, even a group like sales development, it's very easy for me to see what everyone's working on. And it's easy to see the progress that's being made. And so I can go filter by different organizations. I could filter by marketing. I could filter by sales operations, human resources, but it's just a really great way to see what is happening in each organization. Because we are one shared work platform, we allow for you to have this transparent approach across your business and to see base and be able to collaborate with the other things that are happening that may not be as visible if you didn't have a shared work platform. Last thing I want to talk about is process flow optimization. So this is what we call value stream analytics. And so what value stream analytics is basically shows you how much time all of these different stages in your software development takes. So how long does it take for your product managers to create work? How long does it take for your developers to code the next code request? How long does it take for your code test process to take? How long does it take for people to agree on a solution? And how long does it take for these solutions to now get implemented for your customers? And so this is really important because if you're a VP, it's really important to know what the bottlenecks in your organization are. Without these types of metrics, you may not be spending your time and your money on the right things. And so what we have given over here is the visibility into basically seeing what each stage in your software development process is taking. And so the other thing that we do is, let's just say that you had some major initiative that started 90 days ago. It was a $2 million initiative, bought some new tooling, hired some new people, some consultants. I want to see how this impacts my business efficiency. So 90 days ago, where are my numbers at? Now 30 days ago, where are my numbers at? All the way to last week, have things improved? And so as a business level leader, I'm constantly looking for ways to improve these numbers. And so by surfacing these numbers, I now have visibility into my organization. All right, so that's it for business leaders. The next type of prospect that I want to mention is architects. And so these are really important to understand. These are senior technical influencers. And so what I mean by this is that ultimately, if you're a director or a VP, a lot of times you have an architect or a chief architect that reports to you. And so for a lot of the technical implementation decisions, you're actually going to rely on your architect to give you advice. And so to sort of illustrate this, let's just say that you are a senior director in a large business. Every once in a while, you're going to be in charge of some large initiative. That initiative is going to have technical components. But because you've been busy operating on the business side for the last 15 years, you're actually not the best person to figure out some of these more granular technical decisions. So what you do in instances like this is that you often delegate some of these tasks onto your architect. And so this is why I call them senior technical influencers. They're great influencers for your ultimate decision maker. Some of the things that they choose, which technologies do we want to invest in? How do they work together? And they often directly report to leadership. So that's architects. The only other thing that I want to talk about is that you're really looking for someone like a transformation architect, a cloud architect, even like, but what you don't want is you don't want a solutions architect, because solutions architects are sales engineers generally. So they don't function in this role. All right, so ultimately, now that we've gone over a lot of different types of people, what are some of the best practices on who to reach out to? Your time's valuable. You only have a certain number of hours per week. So whom should you engage so that you can maximize your success here? And so one of the things that I want to talk about is embracing iteration. It's really important to have a process here for trial and error. And what I mean by that is, if you talk to someone on your team that's having a lot of great success, implement a lot of the things that they're doing, then you could get completely different results because your region may be different, your industry may be different, because things are ultimately changing all the time. That's why it's really important to have some process for trying new ideas and seeing which ones are working and which ones aren't working. What I do when I prospect is I'll try something for 2 weeks. I'll collect data on what's working and what's not. And then if it ends up being successful, I'll keep that. If it wasn't successful, I'll try something else. And I keep on trying and trying and trying until I get better and better and better. And I basically have turned it into a game. There's no universal advice in sales development. What works for you is not going to necessarily work for someone else on your team. An example of this in terms of embracing iteration. So here's one of the pilot studies that I've done, connected blindly with people on LinkedIn, had a 20% success rate. And then I sent out message A. And after I sent out message A, I got a 44% conversion rate. After I started sending out message B, I got only a 15% conversion rate. And so this is the message that I stuck with. So having things like this, we're constantly iterating and improving in our craft. This is basically going to be how you ultimately level up as a sales development professional here at GitLab. The other thing that I want to talk about is finding the DevOps decision maker. And the reason why I want to mention this is because a lot of businesses don't have someone with necessarily where it's like director of DevOps, VP of DevOps in their title. There are some organizations in which they do have a director of DevOps, but from what I've seen, this is the minority. So that being said, because many of these businesses don't have director of DevOps mentioned in their title, then it's important to look through people's LinkedIn and to see, are they in charge of implementing DevOps? Do they mention a lot of DevOps tooling that they've worked with? But if it does, then this person is the DevOps decision maker. And finding the DevOps decision maker is going to be one of the #1 ways in which you're going to save time. You have a finite amount of time. So if you prospect out to a lot of these people that aren't in charge of DevOps, they might have an opinion, you might be able to get a meeting, but ultimately it's the DevOps decision maker that's going to generally buy our product. That's not always the case, but in generally that is the case. So some of the best practices on the enterprise side, we often land with directors/VP and architects. So these are the 3 titles that we get a lot of our success with. Ultimately, once again, finding the DevOps decision maker, whether or not that's a director or whoever in your organization. And so this is the top-down approach. Sometimes people take a bottoms-up approach where they try to land on a lot of different managers in a single enterprise. And the reason why is because many companies are so big that every single business unit basically functions as a separate business. And so they're not even talking to each other. And so you can actually sell GitLab to 5, 10, 15 different teams all in the same company. So that's the bottoms up approach. Some people have success with that. If you are an enterprise sales development representative here, you should collaborate with your sales counterpart to figure out which approach makes the most sense for your accounts. And the other thing that I want to talk about is if you're talking on the enterprise level, generally avoid technical individual contributors unless they are architects. Because at this point, these businesses often are so large that they may have reduced influence. On the mid-market/SMB level, we can land higher, so VP or C level. It's not uncommon for someone in SMB to have a conversation with a CTO. So once again, we can land higher, but ultimately the goal is the same. Find the DevOps decision maker. And the other thing to sort of point out is that a lot of times in a smaller engineering business, a lot of people have to wear many hats, right? And then so your product manager may actually be responsible for DevOps too, just because that's what he knew about in a past life. That was actually the case when I was an engineer. When I worked for a startup, our product person was actually doing DevOps too. And once again, it's just an example of how people have to wear many hats. And so your title may not necessarily be what you are actually doing in an organization like that. So starting to wrap up the presentation. So it's really about asking relevant questions to reveal pain and help our customers to understand their situation from a different perspective. And so what I mean by this is, I'll give you an example. One of our competitors, Jenkins, is pretty much a de facto choice for many of our customers. And so if you ask them up front if they like their Jenkins, they'll say like, it's okay. But then if I ask probing questions like, all right, how much time do you spend maintaining your Jenkins server? Has your Jenkins server ever broken down on you at some sort of really important time in the development cycle? Have you ever been late for a project because of problems with your Jenkins server? Then all of a sudden, we've helped our customer to understand, wait, there actually was a problem. Now I want to go find out more about what solutions could be. And so ask intelligent probing questions. And so you can start off with something like, what are some of the initiatives that you have? What are some of the challenges that you're facing? Tell me more about that, right? One of the great things that we can do, and a general rule of thumb, is that your prospect should be speaking at least 50% of the time in all of your conversations. And here are the number 1 and number 2 complaints that buyers have by survey data. Number 1 is that salespeople don't do a good enough job of listening, and that the number 2 most common complaint is that sellers ask questions that don't add value. So we want to add value. So how do we ask questions in a way that helps to contribute in this manner? So here are some examples of some questions. I'm not going to go through all of them. The slides, once again, will be shared. But really what I want people to understand here is the fact that these questions change as I go from technical individual contributor to level 1 manager, and then they start changing again to become more business focused as I get to the VP and C level. And so from a technical individual contributor, it's all about features, functionality. What can GitLab do? How can it do it better than other tools, and things like that? How can GitLab help the people who are in charge of implementation to speed up their process and achieve their goals? So things like speed, efficiency, demos, case studies. These are really great for technical individual contributors. Now, all of a sudden, for managers, so probing, how often do you deliver projects on time? What are the things that you're working on? What are some of the bottlenecks in that? What are some of the ways in which you've brainstormed to relieve some of those bottlenecks? And once again, a manager is responsible for generally a group of engineering processes. And so what I mean by that is they're responsible for maybe 1 to 2 websites, maintaining them. So how can GitLab help these managers to do their job better? On the director level, now starting to talk more about best practices like automation, talking about software silos, talking about how GitLab can help your teams to communicate better as a group. And then now for senior leadership questions, how do we help? What are some of the things that you're trying to implement for your entire business unit? What is your 3-year plan, right? What are some of the bottlenecks? What are some of the technologies that are involved? What are some of the cultural changes that you may be working on so that you can have a great and winning team? So other things is customer references, what their peer organizations are doing, great asset to give someone in senior leadership. All right, great. So just trying to summarize everything. I know that we talked about a lot of things today. And really, it comes down to 4 main points. These 4 points are the fact that it's really important to tailor your language and assets for the different people that we talk to. One of the big groups that we have is whether or not you're talking to someone who's a technical individual contributor or someone in leadership. Also, the fact that it's also going to vary between someone who's a level 1 manager and someone who's on the VP level. So once again, as we go higher in the organization, I'm going to be talking more about these business level goals. Number 2, finding the DevOps decision maker. Your time's valuable. So how do you maximize your time? You can maximize your time by finding the specific DevOps decision maker, which is going to yield you the best results. Number 3, embracing iteration and prospecting. Try to turn it into a game. Try to always find ways to improve. And then number 4, asking great questions. So that's the presentation for today. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you.